Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host, Cindy.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. Today we're going to be talking about covering garage floors, and we'd like to thank Emma Clark for liking and sharing the podcast. The first garages were just converted carriage houses till around the 1920s, and then in the 1950s, garages were starting to become attached to the house, so it was convenient and you could store more things in there. And this was usually off to the side or behind the house, and in the 1950s, 60% of homes had a garage.
Really?
In the 1970s, the garage started to become the dominant design, so in the front of the house, because most families had two cars. And now it's weird. You look at some homes, and that's like the first impression is just the garage is what you see in the front. Nirvana and Metallica, they started off practicing in a garage. And Apple and Walt Disney started in a garage.
Nice.
To cover your garage floor, you can use paints, epoxy, or tile, and there's a lot of new chemicals and blends, but we're going to cover the most popular products you'll find either at the local hardware store or the home center. And I was speaking to Valspar, and their tech department was telling me that most of the concrete stains and paints you see cannot be used in the garage. The weight and the heat of the tires, if you park your car or your truck on it, as the tire cools, it actually sucks up that paint or stain, and it'll pull it off as you pull it away.
So even though it says concrete, paint, or stain, you can't use it in the garage unless it says garage?
Exactly. So you're looking for something that says for garages, and especially what you're looking for is it will resist hot tire pickup. The garage floor paints, or the one-part epoxy garage floor paints, are an acrylic latex paint, and they put a small amount of epoxy into it for durability. Most of these can be applied in one coat, but look at the instructions. Some recommend a second coat or a clear top coat, and then make sure you see what they're recommending. A lot of companies, you can't intermix top coats.
Really?
So it's important that you look at it. Many of these can be tinted to a variety of colors, and then most garage paints recommend that you're putting a primer on first, so it helps bond the paint to the concrete to prevent hot tire pickup. And if you're using multiple gallons for your garage, make sure you're intermixing them into a 5-gallon bucket so you're going to get a uniform color.
Right.
And then look how long it needs to cure before you park your car in it, because some of the paints are 7 days.
Wow. So this isn't like a weekend project?
Well, yeah, weekend project, but then you got to wait another week till you can use it. A two-part epoxy is going to be much more durable than just a paint. And the epoxy coatings are going to protect your floor from stains and chemicals, like especially from your car. Oil, gas, brake fluid, antifreeze. And they're more resistant to impact, so if you drop tools in your garage or you're dragging toolboxes around. And then if you live in a cold climate, it's going to stand up to ice melt and the road salt if it's melting off your car. Some products can be slippery when wet, the epoxies, so look at the label for anti-skid or anti-slip. And some of these kits are going to come with this aggregate or color flakes that you throw onto the epoxy, and that's going to add traction. And if your kit doesn't come with it, make sure that you're looking at the aggregate, that it matches the chemical. Because when I was talking to the tech guys at Valspar, they said some of the aggregates do not match and they just dissolve. So they're going to do nothing.
That's a bummer.
Many of the two-part epoxy coatings, you only need to apply it in one step, although some manufacturers recommend putting a clear top coat over the top of it for more durability, so check the label. With paint or epoxy, the concrete has to be dry, so it's going to bond to it. If you have a garage that stays damp, or you want a more decorative floor treatment, you can get interlocking tiles or roll-out mats. But just make sure that they're rated for garage use. That way they're going to stand up to the weight and the movement of cars and trucks.
What do you mean that the concrete stays damp?
So if you live in an area where you have a high water table, or let's say when they built your house they didn't use the proper vapor barriers, you can get moisture being drawn up through your concrete. So, and there's a lot of homes where the concrete floor in your garage, it's damp. It stays damp.
That's weird.
If you're putting down garage paint or a two-part epoxy, you have to make sure you prep the surface. And if you have an existing sealer, a paint, or an epoxy already on your concrete floor, you need to make sure it's solid there's no flaking or peeling, and the surface needs to be scuffed up with either sandpaper. You can use liquid sandpaper, or you can remove it with a stripper. And they want you, if you're going to be sanding it, they want you to use 120 grit sandpaper, and then I would use a drywall sanding pole and pad.
Right.
It's the easiest to use. Make sure
So
that
you're not on your hands and knees.
right, and make sure you're wearing a dust mask. And then I would use a scraper all across the surface, work around to check how stable the finish is. And then if you have to remove a coating that's not solid, I would use some type of concrete and masonry paint stripper. When you're working with a paint stripper for the garage, I'd use a deck brush and a paint pole to smooth an even coat over the surface, and then check the label how long you're supposed to leave it on in one area. A lot of them are an hour, some are up to 5 hours.
Wow.
And you need to keep it wet. You need to watch it, and if it starts to dry out, you need to reapply the stripper so that it stays wet. And then once it starts to pull up or starts to wrinkle, you know it's working, and then you're going to use a scraper on a pole to remove the finish. You can scrape this into a dustpan and place it in garbage bags and then rinse it thoroughly. You don't want to rinse this down into the storm drains. If you don't have a finish on there, so there's no sealer, any paint or anything, you just have bare concrete, the first step is to test it to see what the moisture level is there, or just see if you have a moisture problem. And the way you're going to do that is you're going to take a 2 foot by 2 foot square of plastic, and you're going to use duct tape and tape it in place and leave this for 24 hours. If water forms on the inside of this, so you have, just
I get it now.
moisture inside there, and if it turns your concrete dark, tile's going to be your best option.
Oh.
Because these paint or a 2-part epoxy will not stick to the concrete.
So you're just wasting your money.
Right, yeah. If you've got a moisture problem, it's just going to come up.
But do most people know that you should do this first?
Yeah, weird. It's such a subtle thing. And I don't see, like most of the instructions, there's such fine print that I don't know how many people...
a magnifying glass?
Yeah, how many people... Yeah, it should come with a magnifying glass.
So what if you have new concrete?
Yeah, you need to wait at least 30 to 45 days. If you've just had concrete poured and you want to put a paint or an epoxy over it, you need to wait 30 to 45 days.
Okay.
Once your floor passes the moisture test, you have to remove any wax, oil, grease, or dirt, because if you don't get up the contaminants, you're going to get fisheye, especially if you use an epoxy. And these are little circles or craters where the material is actually pulling away from the concrete. So it's wild. So I worked a couple of years for a spray paint company, and we repainted metal cabinets and appliances, and we would either use epoxies or acrylic enamel. And if there was an area that you didn't clean thoroughly, it would just create these divots, and it was wild, where you'd have this beautiful finish and then just this horrible pocky look, And so we would have to let it dry, strip it down, and repaint. So make sure you clean and use a heavy-duty degreaser, a couple top-rated, Pour and Restore. So it's Pour dash the letter N dash Restore, and this is a citrus-based degreaser. Simple Green Crud Cutter, and it's KRUD KUTTER, and ZEP ZEP citrus degreaser were all rated very high. And then also look at the degreaser that's recommended by the company where you're using their products, because some of these chemicals don't interact very well.
Right.
And you always want to make sure that you're rinsing it thoroughly, but still see what they're recommending. After using the degreaser to get up any spots, you want to scrub down the whole floor with a deck brush on a pole. Some manufacturers recommend using a cleaner like this over the whole surface and rinse thoroughly quite a few times. A power washer is also recommended to make sure it's thoroughly clean.
Interesting.
Now you're going to want to acid etch the concrete, and most companies are going to have their own product like a clean end etch, but you can use muriatic acid or something less caustic like a phosphoric acid.
And what is this doing?
This is stripping the surface. So when they float your concrete, they create a very smooth surface, and a garage paint or a 2-part epoxy isn't going to grab as well if it's smooth. So you want to, it almost needs to feel like sandpaper when you're done with this, and it's going to grab hold of the top coat that you're putting on it. You want to work on damp concrete. So this is good like right after you've cleaned it and rinsed it. You want it to stay damp while you're working with the acid. And I would work in like a 10-foot by 10-foot area. I would use a plastic watering can to sprinkle the acid on my area. I'm going to use a deck brush with a pole. I'm going to scrub it for 5 to 10 minutes.
Wow.
And then hose it down. And before you hose it down, I would hose down my driveway so that this is just going to move off the driveway very quickly. It's not going to etch your driveway. And then I would soak the lawn around the driveway.
I was going to ask about that.
Because you don't want to kill your grass. Right, exactly. So you're working in an area. After 10 minutes, you're going to hose it down, and then you're going to work section by section till you get the whole floor done.
What kind of shoes should you be wearing with this?
Use work shoes, or what I always did was I took plastic bags and I would cover my shoes and then use rubber bands around my ankles.
That's good.
Some people use golf shoes with the spikes to float above it. Once you've rinsed your entire garage out, you can mix 1 cup of baking soda in a gallon of water and put it into your plastic watering can and pour this over the floor and allow it to set for about 10 minutes. And this is going to neutralize any remaining acid. Let's say you didn't rinse it thoroughly, or there's some little divots that caught a little bit of this acid. And then rinse it very thoroughly and feel the surface. And it should feel very rough. If there's any areas that don't look rough, then re-etch those areas. You want to let the concrete dry overnight or longer. It needs to be thoroughly dry. And I would leave the garage door open, maybe get a box fan in there all night so that it's dry. And then the next day you're going to do the water drop test. So we've done this with a lot of other coatings we've done. But you're going to drip a few drops of water here and there around your concrete floor, and it should absorb right away.
Right.
If it beads up, you need to acid etch it again. And I also gave Rust-Oleum a call and talked to their tech department. And when we were talking about, covering your floor with either a garage paint or a 2-part epoxy, they emphasized that this is the most important part, is the etching.
Really?
They said nothing else is more important than this. Now you're going to patch any cracks and holes, and some products can be used with a latex crack filler, and some recommend an epoxy crack filler. So make sure you're looking at the label before you pick it up. But you want to fill any holes and divots and cracks, and then give it one last cleaning. So either use a leaf blower or a push broom, and you want to make sure that there's no dust or anything on the surface. When you're applying a paint or a 2-part epoxy, you want to check the humidity. You want low humidity, no rain in the forecast. Most of these products, you want to put it on when the temperature is between 60 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, but make sure you look at the label. For paint, if you're mixing multiple gallons, I would mix them in a 5-gallon bucket so you have a uniform color.
Right.
And then some of these 2-part epoxy kits, if you're doing a large garage and you have 2 parts, like a part A and a part B,
right.
But some kits you'll have multiple part A's, so multiple containers, and multiple part B. You would want to mix all of the A's together in a small container, and then the B's together in a small container, and that way you can mix a small batch at a time and work through a large garage. Never mix all the A and the B until you're ready to use it.
So not together?
Right. And then if you have paint that you're going to be putting on, most of them recommend a primer first. Check the cure rate, how long between putting down the primer and when the paint should go on it. If your paint requires 2 coats, make sure you look at the cure rates for that too. If you're using a 2-part epoxy, you want to see how fast it cures and how long you have to work once you mix the 2 chemicals into a 5-gallon bucket.
Probably kind of important.
Well, I've seen some kits that are only an hour.
Wow.
So a lot of them are
no break time.
Yeah, so some are 2 hours. With 2 people, you're going to have one cutting along the edge. The other one's going to be rolling with a paint roller and pole. I would work in a 4-foot by 4-foot area. If you're using chips, which really add resistance from slipping, and also it looks very decorative, you're going to work in a small area, throw these chips up in the air. They actually recommend you throw them 5 or 6 feet into the air, and it's going to drop down in a nice random pattern. And I would also know how many sections I'm going to do, and then I would divide my chips into the amount of sections, so I don't run out. And then if you have chips that fall outside your wet area and you're getting ready to paint in that area, you can just leave those chips down and roll right over them. I would keep a wet edge and keep moving. And when I was talking
we only got an hour. It's go time.
Right. And when I was talking to the tech guys, they said one of the biggest mistakes that homeowners make when they try to use a 2-part epoxy is they're trying to stretch it. So you want to
putting it on too thin?
Right. So they want it to go further.
Right,
Make sure you have a nice even coat. You don't want to pull it too thin. With the 2-part epoxies, you want to leave it at least for a day before you stand on it, 3 to 5 days before you park a car on it, and look at the instructions. Every chemical mix is a little bit different. The longer you wait, the stronger it's going to be. And then if you're thinking about the difference between a paint and a 2-part kit, so a lot of times you see these gallons of garage paint, and they're only like $30 to $40, and you're thinking, well, this is going to be the cheapest way to go.
Right.
But what you don't think about is, let's say that we're using the paint with a little bit of epoxy in it, and you buy that gallon. Most companies recommend to use a primer, or it's not going to be as effective.
Right.
So that's $20. You're going to need a crack fill, which is anywhere from $10 to $20. You're going to need acid etch, which is $10, a cleaner $10. Let's say you want to use the chips so it's not slippery. So you're looking at about $95. If you buy one of these 2-part epoxy kits like at the hardware store, they run about $100 depending on the kit. But most of them are going to come with your epoxy, acid etch, and the chips. So the only thing you need to add to that is crack filler and cleaner. So you're looking at maybe $120, and a 2-part epoxy is going to be much more durable than this 1-part paint. So, for a little bit more, I would say that the 2-part epoxy is what you're looking for.
Right.
A step up from the 2-part epoxies for your garage floor are the polycuramines. And these are a blend of polyurethane, polyurea, and epoxy. It's about 20 times stronger than the standard 2-part epoxy.
Wow.
And one of the top rated is called Rock Solid, and that's the Rock Solid garage kit. And these run about $200 for the kit. And what's nice about this is it actually cures in about 48 hours.
Oh, that's nice.
You can also get a commercial kit, and these are 100% solid epoxy, where the other kits are water-based. With these, they cure much quicker, so you have to be very fast with this.
So maybe 3 or 4 people to help you?
Yeah, you need a team, man. You need to also wear a respirator, but they're, it's much more durable. A lot of these have a 20-year life. Some have lifetime warranties. One of the top rated that you can get in the home centers is Epoxy Coat. It runs around $300, and their kit comes with a 5-gallon bucket, the epoxy, roller covers, paint brushes, the chips, acid etch. You've got a tool for mixing it in that 5-gallon bucket, and then a squeegee.
Nice. What are some top-rated companies?
So for paint, Behr, B-E-H-R, has their garage floor paint, and this is just one and done. Drylok, D-R-Y-L-O-K, it's called their concrete paint for garages. And then Sealcrete, S-E-A-L-K-R-E-T-E, their epoxy seal garage floor was rated very high. In 2-part epoxies, Valspar has their garage floor coatings, and then Rust-Oleum has 3 grades. So their epoxy shield is about a 50% solids. Their Rust-Oleum professional coating kit for garages is about 80% solids, and those are their 2. And then they have the Rock Solid kits, and those are the polycuramines. And then in a commercial grade, epoxy coat, and that's 100% solid epoxy. If you have concrete floors that are just too high moisture, or you want a more decorative look, you can get hard plastic floor tiles for garages. They usually come 12-inch by 12-inch. The interlocking ones are a peg and loop system. So all you do is fit them together, and then you snap them down with a rubber mallet. And you can either get a solid surface or a ribbed surface that's open, so it's going to allow for drainage, especially if you're in your cold climate and you get a lot of snow and salt on your cars and it drips off inside the garage. It'll allow it to all flow through. And these are very easy to clean, either with a hose or power washer. They're resistant to automotive chemicals and ice melt. And I would also look for something UV resistant. Some are going to add a little rubber to it if you're looking for a non-slip surface. And then if you have to do a lot of work on your cars or drag heavy toolboxes around, I would look at the strength rating. Some are rated up to 5,000 pounds per square inch.
Wow.
And with these interlocking garage tiles, this is going to be floating on top of your garage floor. I would leave about a 1/2-inch gap all the way around for expansion on hot days. And what's nice about the tile is you need very little floor prep. You're just going to caulk and repair any cracks and holes. Some manufacturers recommend that you put a clear concrete sealer, especially if you're in a cold climate. That way, if your car is pulling in all the snow or moisture and it drips into these cracks and your garage freezes, you don't get that freeze-thaw cycle. And then some pros are recommending that you use a high-end landscape fabric, and you lay this down first and then put your floating tile over it, because some of them kind of chatter. The plastic kind of makes a noise when you walk on it. And so the landscape material, it allows moisture to go through it, and then it also stops the noise. And then one other style you can get for your garage, if you want it less expensive, is just roll-out mats. And so you just it's easy to cover an ugly floor.
What are some top-rated companies?
You have Race Deck, Diamond Deck, G-Floor, Great Mats, and Gladiator.
One thing you haven't addressed is how big is a normal garage?
So a one-car garage, usually they're 12 feet by 20 feet up to 14 feet by 22 feet, so somewhere in that range.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'd want to do your length and your width. You want to do your
Some math.
hardware math.
Yeah.
And for a two-car garage, usually 20 foot by 20 foot up to 22 feet by 22 feet. And then, if you have a 1.5 or a 2.5 car garage, it's going to be bigger.
Because that's going to factor into which product you pick.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You definitely have to do your measurements first.
Because if you go into the store and the kit says one car garage,
Right.
I mean, there is a variance here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you should need to know your square feet.
Right.
Do you have anything else to add?
I like the coatings in your garage because it's going to look great, and then especially the two-part epoxies, if you have any spills, very easy to clean up.
Right.
If you live in a cold climate, you're not going to get this moisture down into cracks and crevices. You don't have that freeze-thaw cycle that's going to break up your concrete. And some old concrete, it starts to give off that white powder.
Right, that you drag it into your house.
Right, exactly. With the two-part epoxies, they're much more durable than the paints. If you can't use a paint or an epoxy, tile is really a fast, easy way to get a decorative look and also protect your floor. I would say if you're going to be painting, make sure it's low humidity. There's no rain in the forecast. You want to look at the temperature, 60 to 80 degrees for most of the products. And prep is the most important part of it.
Well, this is a thing that you're going to have to plan out. This isn't something you're just going to, hey, let's go to the store and let's do this weekend.
Right, exactly.
Because you have a lot of prep and you need to know your measurements. You need to really plan out how you're going to do this.
And it's going to take time. I don't think people realize how long this takes.
But you're out of your garage for 7 days.
Right. Yeah, and the cure rate. Make sure that you give it plenty of time to cure.
Let's wrap this up.
Book 3 is at the editor, so hopefully
Thanks for all the help, by the way.
You're welcome. That'll be back in a week or so. So we're close.
Yeah.
Oh, painful.
Yeah, it was.
If you like our podcast, you can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, the Spotify mobile app, the Google Play Music app, or iHeartRadio.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review.
You can check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
And you can subscribe to that as well.
You can get book 1 or 2 on Amazon, Home Improvement Solutions, what every homeowner should know. I think book 3 is going to be great.
I think so too, since I wrote it.
I helped.
Yes.
I did a little.
There was quotation marks around helped. But if you enjoyed book 1 and 2, please leave us a 5-star rating and review.
You can email us at fixitpodcast@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening.
Talk to you next week.